The sun was shining brightly in the sky, spreading its warmth over the small town where tranquility reigned in the tree-lined streets. Children's laughter echoed in the parks, bicycles zipped along the sidewalks, and everything seemed to follow its natural course. Among these youngsters was a girl named Clara, only 14 years old, whose smile illuminated any place she went. Intelligent, curious, and full of life, she loved to explore the world around her, always in search of new adventures. That afternoon, Clara decided to go out for a bicycle ride. It was a habit that gave her an incomparable sense of freedom. The wind on her face, the sound of tires gliding over the asphalt, and the thrill of traversing both familiar and unfamiliar paths made her feel alive. Before she left, her parents warned her, as they always did, to be careful with the traffic. With a carefree wave, she assured them that she would be back soon. The sky was an impeccable blue. The trees swayed gently in the wind and everything seemed perfect, until it suddenly wasn't. As she pedaled down a street she knew well, Clara approached an intersection. The traffic light was green, and without hesitation she proceeded. But at that very moment the unexpected happened. A car at high speed appeared out of nowhere. The driver, distracted by a moment of carelessness, did not see the young girl crossing. The impact was devastating. Clara's body was hurled into the air and fell violently onto the asphalt. The sound of the crash echoed down the street, followed by screams of horror. People ran to help her, desperately calling emergency services. The driver, pale and trembling, got out of the car in disbelief at what had happened. The girl's bicycle was destroyed, and her small body lay motionless on the ground. When the paramedics arrived, they found Clara with no vital signs. Her pulse was weak, her breathing almost non-existent, and then her heart stopped. For 10 minutes, Clara hovered between life and death. At the hospital, the doctors did everything they could to revive her, applying emergency procedures to bring her back to consciousness. Her parents, desperate, prayed in the corridor, tears streaming down their faces as they watched the doctors fight for their daughter. But Clara was no longer there. She felt as if she were being pulled away from her own body. At first, it was confusing. She could see everything from above, the doctors trying to save her, her parents in tears, and even the street where it had all happened. But gradually, everything began to change. The environment around her grew bright, enveloped by a light that radiated peace and warmth. Soft, ethereal sounds filled the space, and an overwhelming tranquility embraced her. Clara found herself in a place unlike anything she had ever known. The ground seemed to be made of pure gold. The air vibrated with an indescribable energy, and a sense of completeness dominated her being. She felt whole, without pain, without fear, without any trace of anguish. It was then that she noticed a presence. A figure of light was approaching her, emanating a peace so profound that no words could describe it. She immediately knew who it was. Jesus. His gaze met hers, and Clara felt a connection so intense that no words were necessary. He knew what she was feeling, what she was thinking, and conveyed a message without speaking. Everything was all right. He took her hand, and at the moment of the touch, an indescribable warmth enveloped her, as if she were being filled with divine energy. But there was something more. Jesus took her to a vantage point where she could observe the earth in a way she had never imagined possible. From there, she saw the world as never before, not only the beauties of creation, but also the shadows that spread over humanity. What she saw made her shudder. Images flashed before her eyes like glimpses of a possible future. Devastating fires, ruined cities, people fleeing from natural disasters, conflicts pushing nations to the brink of collapse. The world was in danger. Clara looked at Jesus, her heart heavy in the face of the destruction she witnessed. She could not fully comprehend what was happening. In a firm yet compassionate voice, he said to her, "What you see are the consequences of humanity's choices. The future is not written, but every decision made today shapes tomorrow." Clara felt a lump form in her throat. Amid the scenes of chaos, there were also moments of light, people helping one another, communities coming together to rebuild what was destroyed, individuals fighting to do what was right, even in the face of adversity. The contrast between good and evil was stark. Humanity's destiny was not sealed, but fragile depending on the actions of each individual. Then the vision changed once again. Before her, a new scene emerged. A figure stood out amidst a crowd. His face was unmistakable, his expression carried determination, and his presence evoked opposing reactions. Some followed him fervently, others rejected him with hatred. Clara frowned. She recognized that man, Donald Trump. She saw him facing gigantic challenges, battling fierce opposition, and being the target of constant attacks. Yet despite everything, he remained steadfast, defying forces that operated in the shadows. Confused, Clara turned to Jesus. "Why him?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. Jesus looked deeply at her before answering, "He is not perfect, no man is, but he was placed in this time for a purpose. His role is not to save the world, but to reveal what was hidden." The vision continued. Clara saw assassination attempts being thwarted at the last moment. Explosions, attacks, strategies devised to silence him. But what impressed her most was that, amid all the turbulence, something was being exposed. Hidden truths were coming to light, and people were being forced to see what had previously gone unnoticed. And then, the final scene was revealed to her. A city of the future, modern buildings, bustling streets, an apparent balance between humanity and technology. At the center of it all stood a futuristic Tesla truck, a symbol of innovation and progress. But in the blink of an eye, chaos took over the scene. A devastating explosion destroyed part of the city. Clara felt a shiver as she saw panic engulf the people. "What does this mean?" she asked, her heart racing. Jesus looked at her with gravity. "The spiritual battle is real. There are forces that wish to destroy progress, spread fear and control humanity. Confusion is their greatest weapon. But there is still hope." Before she could fully process everything she was witnessing, Clara felt a tug. The light around her began to fade, and she was pulled back into her body. The hospital, the doctors, her parents, everything returned in an instant. With a deep sigh, her eyes opened. She was alive. The doctors were shocked. Her parents wept, hugging her as if they would never let her go. But Clara knew that her mission was not over. She had returned with a purpose, and she needed to share the message that had been entrusted to her. In the days following her recovery, Clara realized that something within her had changed forever. It was not just the fact that she had come back to life after a near-death experience, but the weight of the message she had received. The images of destruction, hope, and spiritual struggle were still fresh in her mind. She knew she could not keep this to herself. However, the task before her was not easy. How could she explain something so supernatural to the people around her? How could she convince anyone that she had been in the presence of Jesus and received a warning about the future of humanity? Even though a burning fire smoldered inside her, the idea of sharing her experience made her apprehensive. At the first opportunity, Clara tried to speak with her parents. They had been her fortress throughout her recovery and deserved to know the truth. Sitting by her hospital bed, she took a deep breath and began to recount everything. The light that enveloped her, the peace she felt, the encounter with Jesus, the visions he showed her. She spoke about the future of Earth, the forces of darkness that were trying to manipulate humanity, and the crucial role of Trump in that moment. Her father frowned and crossed his arms. Her mother held her hand tenderly, but her eyes reflected concern. "Dear, are you sure it wasn't just a dream?" her mother asked, choosing her words carefully. Clara felt a tightness in her chest. She had hoped that her family would believe her without hesitation, but she knew that her story was hard to accept. Still, she could not go back. "Mother, I know what I saw. It wasn't a dream. It was real." Her voice was firm. "I felt the presence of Jesus. He showed me things I could never have known on my own. He gave me a mission." Her father sighed, rubbing his face. "This is a lot to process, daughter." He looked at his wife, who nodded. "But we know that something has changed in you. Whatever it was that happened, you came back different." Clara did not want to force them to believe immediately. She knew that the truth would reveal itself in time. So she decided to take one step at a time. Her first mission was to share her story with those willing to listen. When she was finally discharged and returned home, Clara spent days reflecting on the best way to spread her message. She began writing down everything she could remember in a diary, recording every detail of her experience. Every word she put on paper strengthened her conviction. The story was not just hers, it was a warning for all of humanity. Determined, she began sharing her experience with close friends. Some listened with curiosity, others with skepticism. Some even mocked her, calling her exaggerated. But there were those who felt something different when they heard her words. They saw the passion in her eyes, the certainty in her voice. Clara was not making it up. She truly believed in what she said, and that made all the difference. Over time, her story began to spread. Some people started asking more about what she had seen, especially regarding the forces that were trying to manipulate humanity. Others wanted to know more about the presence of Trump in her visions. Why him? What is his true role in all this? They wondered. Whenever that question arose, Clara repeated Jesus' words, "He was not chosen for being perfect. He was placed in this time because his presence forces hidden truths to come to light." This statement elicited mixed reactions. Some agreed while others refused to accept it. But regardless of their opinions about Trump, Clara knew that the spiritual battle was much larger than any political figure. The true enemy was not a man or a government. It was the darkness that sought to blind humanity. The visions she had experienced continued to haunt her thoughts. The city of the future, the Tesla truck, the explosion, the attacks against Trump. Everything seemed to be part of a larger plan. It was as if the world were heading toward a decisive moment where people would have to choose between truth and illusion. She realized that her mission was not only to warn of the dangers, but also to inspire hope. Jesus had shown her that despite the chaos, there was still light. There were still those who fought for good, who chose unity over division. The future was not set in stone. It could be changed. So she decided to expand her message. She created an online channel where she began to tell her story. She shared every detail, from the accident to her encounter with Jesus and the revelations she received. At first, few people watched. But as the days passed, more and more viewers began to appear. The comments were varied. Some said that her experience had touched them deeply. Others called her crazy, claiming that it was all just an illusion. But Clara remained undeterred. She knew that her mission was not to convince everyone, but to plant seeds of reflection. Her story began to gain attention. Invitations for interviews on podcasts and at churches started to come in. Pastors wanted her to share her vision with their congregations. Christian communities began discussing her words and the message of hope she carried. And to her surprise, even some people who had once mocked her began to take an interest. However, the most controversial part of her message continued to be the mention of Trump. Many rejected the idea that he had a role in the spiritual battle. Others were intrigued, trying to connect the dots. Clara explained that it was not about politics, but about a much larger struggle between light and darkness. As the months passed, Clara saw the impact of her words grow. More people were talking about spirituality, about the need to seek the truth, about the challenges the world was facing. People were beginning to question the narratives imposed upon them. They were starting to awaken. But Clara knew that the fight was far from over. The forces of darkness would do everything in their power to keep people in ignorance. Fear and misinformation would be their most powerful weapons. And that was why her mission was so important. She needed to continue. In one of her last live broadcasts, Clara made an appeal. The devil's greatest weapon is fear. He wants you to feel powerless, to believe that there is no way out. But I saw with my own eyes, there is still hope. The future is not defined. It can be shaped by us, by our choices. Jesus showed me that. He told me that there is still time. She paused, looking directly into the camera. The only question that remains is, what are you going to do with this information? And so Clara's journey continued. She did not know how many people would hear her message or how many would believe her, but she knew she could not give up. She had returned with a purpose and she was willing to fulfill it until the very end.